America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how the Democrats turned into the party of the well-credentialed Dingbats. And it's not exactly clear how that happened, but you see, I will tell you that all of these civil wars among the GOP, between, for example, the MAGA anti-immigration nativists and the MAGA H-1B highly skilled immigration advocates, all of that's all internal to the GOP. They can have the discussion within the GOP because the GOP turned into a big tent party. There was even a discussion on GOP Twitter about whether Jeff Bezos' wife was dressed, Lauren Sanchez was dressed appropriately because she had, I don't know, provocative blouse on at the inauguration, and they were the thought GOP for thought rights and then the anti-thought GOP, and the entire debate was internal to the GOP, and it just made me keep thinking that like the GOP is just going to keep having these civil wars in a way that grows their party because they're not afraid to actually have two sides within the same party, and in the face of no real Democratic opposition that has nothing to say about any matters in any real like thoughtful way, all the action is going to be in the GOP. So you're going to be like on one side of the GOP against the other side of the GOP, and you're not even going to think about the Democrats. And the Democrats are just going to be the party of well-credentialed dingbats. You know, all of the people who in 2015 wore pussy hats on all the marches, that's fine. You know, they did their thing, and it's only going to be them. Those are the only people who are going to be Democrats, except for like professional class women who were able to take off work to drive up to DC. That's your Democratic base. Everybody else, you know, the people who build things and, you know, plumb and everyone else is going to either not vote because they understand that the government's not working for them, or they're going to vote GOP. Right? So this idea that you can build a party that is solely based around both the sensibilities and the personages of well-credentialed dingbats and then have that become a voting majority is ludicrous. And meanwhile, on the other side, the GOP is going through some growing pains, right? Remember, Elon Musk 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago was a Democrat. Trump 20 years ago was a Democrat. So they're bringing in all of these other people into the GOP party. And you know what they are? Staying in the GOP party. They're not going back to the Dems because the Dems are embarrassing. They don't have any ideas about anything about concerning governance. In a pinch, they'll be a little bit quick to give money to people just to give it to them. But, you know, in a world with inflation, you need to have an argument about like why that's a good idea and why that might not be a good idea. And, you know, an argument about getting labor and work and a way of life out of them. But the Democrats don't want to have that conversation. So they are bad at everything. They don't have the greatest families. They don't have the greatest businesses, and they don't run the greatest cities. So that means they're bad about family, they're bad about civil society, and they're bad about politics. And yet, this is the party that thinks they're going to win in 2024. Now, they might win 2028. They might win in 2026 because, you know, these midterm elections are going to be low voter elections, and the well-credentialed dingbats in their comfortable Zoom jobs, they do vote, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if the Democrats either take back some seats in the House or take back the House or like have some sort of comeback in 2026 because of the low voter turnout in general. But in 2028, when the casuals come out, the casuals are not going to break Dem. The casuals are not going to break Democratic Party because the Democratic Party is going to have to bring receipts. And they can't bring any receipts because nobody wants to live in their cities. And then you look at their families, and the kids got green hair, and, you know, everyone's got a therapist and on a bunch of pills and has some sort of diagnosis. And, you know, they all just can't happen to be genderqueer. Right? Like the Dems are bad about family. They just don't actually understand parenting. So you get Dems being bad about family, and then be like, well, you know, they're bad about family, but they run great businesses. Well, Dems aren't exactly business leaders. You got a lot of like mid-level secretaries among the Democrat populists, and they'll tell you, well, I would have gotten higher except for sexual harassment. Well, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not. So you have a lot of people who aren't great at business, aren't great at family, and you can say like, okay, so the Dems, you look at them and they're not particularly good at, managing their family, and they're not particularly great at managing businesses. And those things kind of matter in America. What about politics? And then you look at Democratic-run cities and states, and you're like, I'm living in Georgia right now, and I'm glad I pandemiced in Georgia, and I am not a GOP stand because I think the party is still like Klan adjacent, but it's a very orderly white supremacy they run here. And, I'm glad they opened during the pandemic, and Georgia is not a bad place. And what I'm worried about is the entire United States turns into the politics of Georgia, where at the state level, it's all run by the GOP, and they are competent white supremacists, like orderly white supremacists. I did a show on this before about how if we don't watch out, the whole U.S. becomes Florida, or the whole U.S. becomes Georgia. And in Trump's America, the soft life is over. All of those make-work jobs for white women that don't really do anything, those are gone. And you're going to have to kind of earn your keep and solve a problem in Trump's United States, which is a little bit dicey. I think there should be a federal job guarantee for different reasons, because you can't really be a free political actor if you don't have, a meaningful job in civil society secured, or a meaningful way to earn in civil society. But Democrats don't make this argument. They could, or they have on the far left. Bernie made this argument, but nobody was listening because the well-credentialed dingbats didn't care, because they don't actually think anything's wrong with America, and they they don't want to think of solutions to fix it. But they're pretty comfortable. This is why when I think Kamala Harris is actually a very good example of a well-credentialed dingbat. I mean, there are crazier white ones, but she's a very good example of a well-credentialed dingbat. When asked if she would do anything different than Joe Biden, she didn't have an idea. She said, I can't think of anything she would do different than the president. And at the time, the president was Joe Biden. That's a ridiculous thing for a candidate to say, especially in a world that's not a utopia. In a world where you just saw President Biden get rolled by Zelensky, and was getting hosed by Bibi Netanyahu, and she had nothing to say. Now, you find me an ambitious 12-year-old, and you make them president for a day, if they could come up with 3 policy positions that are different than the current standing, an ambitious 12-year-old would be able to say yes, and then come up with 5 policy positions, right? For example, I think this is a policy position for free, right? So one of the local Welch's grape. Even if President Biden was awesome, you should be able to think of things to improve upon. Come on. Yeah, that's not too much to ask for. Welch's grape gets it. That's a low bar. That's a low bar. You should have been thinking about it. You should have on the tip of your tongue, since it's pretty much like your job to run for office, you should have policy prescriptions. But let me just talk about something I saw. One of the local kids in my neighborhood just won a scholarship. Regeneron Science Talent Search. He won the Regeneron Science Talent Search. And they identify 300 scholars, and they give $2,000 to the scholar for coming up with some sort of whatever. And they give $2,000 to the school. They match the donation to the school. And they match the donation to the school because they know that you can't really abstract the scholar from the school and still have a good sense of the scholar. So they not only want to thank the scholar and make the scholar one of the Regeneron scholars, they want to thank the school for being the kind of school that incentivizes the scholar's behavior, so the quality of behavior to make the scholar, right? So you don't just give money to the person, you give money to the institution that succored the person. Succored, S-U-C-C-O-R, the person that brought the person in B, that incubated the person. And that is actually a good scholarship. I think we should do that to families, right? The public education burden isn't just about getting kids to school. It's about making sure they learn things. And the people who are better in charge of making sure that they learn things are their family, right? So if we're serious about an educated populace, we should actually, and I've made arguments like this before, pay families when their kids pass grade level tests. At the end of the year, they take tests anyway. At the end of the year, if your kid passes can do fourth grade work at the end of fourth grade, the family gets $10,000. That's a good idea, because we're praising that family for doing family in a way that's good for the United States. Even if there are other legitimate ways to do family, like, the way you can do family in Oman or Yemen, like that might work in Oman or Yemen, but not work in the United States. So we need you to do a family that's going to work in the United States. Right? So I'd like to pay parents for doing their family in a particular way, in the same way that we paid this kid's school, the scholarship paid the kid's school for producing this kid in a certain way, right? So we recognize institutions on some level that they're important figures, but we need to recognize like all of the institutions. And right now, it's either we expect teachers to be awesome, and like I could teach all the kids. Like you pretty much expect teachers to be as good as I am, be excellent, be able to instantly identify when the teachers don't get it, come up with a zillion different scenarios to explain it, and then teach while paying attention to all of the other students, which is hard to do. You could expect all the teachers to be excellent. Or we could just direct and incentivize parents in a little bit better to be a little bit more on code with respect to American parenting. Yeah, someone says, did you vote? Yes, I voted. Of course I voted. I always vote. Just the polling place is right there. I take my family. It's all very adorable. So I think it's easier to actually incentivize and direct parents than it is to expect all teachers to be like a little bit more focused than they are, than expect all teachers to be extraordinary and excellent. Right? So that would be an idea, right? We have a model. Either you go to Bolsa Familia in Brazil, where they pay families for getting their kids to school and getting them vaccinated, or you go to this Regeneron scholarship, where they pay the school for producing the kids. Yeah, I don't think teachers matter. I went to regular schools and magnet schools. I always got good grades because my family valued education. Yeah, you know what? Family. I wouldn't say that teachers don't matter. I will say that family matters more. Like my kids go to a regular school, but they're getting a superb education, because even regular schools in the United States, if your family is put together well, they'll get a fine education. Schools are multipliers. They multiply what's done with the family. And we just aren't honest about, like, if we're serious about a publicly educated populace that's adequate to both civil society and the duties of citizenship, we need to be serious about the quality of families that produce citizens that are adequate to civil society and to ably discharge the responsibilities of citizenship. Right? Not all families, not even all legitimate families can do that. There are legitimate families all over the world that are not quite adequate to what we need families to do in the United States. So you can't punish people for being a different kind of legitimate family. What you can do is incentivize them to be the kind of family that we need in the United States. And insofar as that's a pluralist vision. We just need you to be able to do, fifth grade work at fifth grade or whatever. That's only going to, get out some of the Orthodox Jews who don't think their kids should have to learn anything except the Torah. They're going to take a little bit of a haircut. And, some of the people who don't think their kids should have to, the daughters should have to learn to read and write and everything, that they're going to feel the pinch sometimes. But everybody else is going to, get a little bit of a bonus, a little bit of gas in their tank for raising the family in the particular way that we need in the United States. Right? So there are things you could do. There are ways we can do. And you could say that's kind of like race to the top, except instead of penalizing teachers, what I'm doing is like incentivizing parents. Because I think more happens at home And I say this as a parent of 3 kids and someone who's been in the classroom. A lot happens at home, and certain school only works for certain sorts of parents, so just incentivize them to be certain sorts of parents. And you need a clear vision from up top. All right? Teachers matter to a certain extent. This is Jabo Kim Tumps, Jaboctimus Prime. Jaboctimus Prime. Teachers matter to a certain extent. Some teachers have a hard time controlling their kids' classroom, and that's bad for the kids. Yeah, teachers' management takes a certain quality of charisma that a lot of entitled white women don't have, and since a lot of public school teaching has become make-work jobs for white women, it's a situation we're in. It's a situation we're in. But Tay Honorable says, my family never cared about schooling, just that I wasn't loafing at home from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. But I did have lots of teachers who looked out for me and put me in positions I'd otherwise not have been in. Yeah, so you did not have the family you deserve. You did not have the family you deserve, and teachers filled in the gap. I'm trying to incentivize people like your family who might have meant well, but just kind of confused about the job to do better than they did. You're welcome, Tay Honorable. A lot of people, especially a lot of black people, we did not have the families we deserved for a variety of reasons. But I think there's public policy that can incentivize them to be a little bit more focused on the job, right? But the problem is right now with the Democratic Party is that we're a bunch of well-credentialed dingbats. Well-credentialed dingbats, impossible to take seriously, not good at family, not good at business, not good at politics. You don't want your kids raised by Democrats, you don't want your kids going into business with Democrats, and you don't want your kids in a Democratic city. That is not good for the Democratic Party. That is not good for the Democratic Party. It's not like Republicans are great at all of this. It's just that Democrats are actually that bad. They're actually that bad. Listless. Or rudderless, I think is probably a better. Listless is wrong. They're rudderless. An ethically rudderless party and a hostile to actual, substantive leadership, right? Because they're liberals and they make money by with commercial values, right? Or they're just wives, right? So you got a lot of people who don't really know what it's like to actually do family well, to do business well, or to do politics well. Now running the Democratic Party, and they don't know what it's like to do well because they underestimate how much they went from their fathers to their husbands' care. They went from their Republican fathers to their Republican husbands' care, and they don't really understand that they were never actually good at any of these things and that other people were holding it up for them. And those are your Democrats. Republicans tend to be, especially Republican women, tend to be a little bit more humble about their competence. But this is the situation we're in, and I think that this is a problem. Because the GOP has a lot of people who 15 years ago were Democrats. The GOP is growing. It's facing growing pains, but it is growing. And that is not, and it's growing because it really isn't an ideological opposition. So it allows the GOP to internalize both sides or all sides of complex matters. So no matter how much you disagree with another person, there's a spot within the GOP for you. Can't say the same thing about Democrats. And the GOP, they appreciate their MAGA populace. They know they can't win without them. The GOP leadership knows they can't win without the MAGA populace. The Democrats either don't want to win or think they can win without, or the Democrats think they can win without the left, and that's just not true. The company Democrats think they can win without ideas. And it's atrocious, right? David Ian says schools won't change unless you re-educate admins to stop running schools like wardens. I'm not sure that's a problem. I think there are a lot of reasons schools won't change. I think we're expecting a quality of professional competence that's generally diffused. That's not appropriate. Well, like I said, I think it's better if we just focused on what we could do to make families better public educators in partnership with schools and stop leaving public education just on the schools. Now, I'm not for everyone homeschooling. Make no mistake. I do not think everyone's cut out to be homeschooling. I do not think that everyone should homeschool. I don't think everyone has a disposition. But I do think everyone has a disposition to be better partners with their school. And that's part of the job in an American family. We can incentivize that better. Right? So DJ Monotonous said, I hear what you're saying about Dems being Dems, but I also see when Dems take power, they get shit done. I don't. I see them getting symbolic stuff done, or maybe giving some freebies without actually changing structures. There's no like Dem advocating for a federal job guarantee. Right? So what happens when educated parents bump heads with school curriculum? I mean, they boss around the school. When educated parents bump heads with school curriculum, it's pretty easy. Like my school, my kid's 6th grade social studies class is a little bit too capitalist friendly for me. I think they have, it's a little bit too, I think it's a little bit, yeah. They did a unit on Cuba that I don't think was particularly fair to Cuba. First of all, their literacy rate's higher than ours. We need to think about that, what that means. You know, they have healthcare in Cuba. So, yeah. So DJ Monotonous says child tax credit was pretty great. Yeah, and you know what? That's if the GOP is big enough that the JD Vance wing of the GOP will give you a child tax credit and some, right? So that's not going to be enough. And you need to give an argument, an account of more than just how the Dems are going to give people money. Right? So that's where we're at, right? So David Enos says, and he says, that's the problem. You're inviting families to cut out the middleman and collect the check directly. Well, I am inviting families to take on more of the burden and responsibility and ultimately the pay of publicly educating their kids, right? So right now, Dems have an idea that we can help kids by cutting around the family. And I don't think that's possible. I think you strengthen kids by strengthening families. That means you get people jobs, you secure them good jobs, you secure them good jobs, good unionized jobs at regular wages, and good wages, and you also secure them bargaining power against their employer. And that bargaining power would be to say, like, look, I can just work with my kid more to make sure my kid gets this extra $10,000 for passing a test rather than taking a second shift from you. All of that's good for the American worker. All of that's good for the American worker. So what happens? All right, so good. All right, if you appreciate what I'm saying, which I think, if you appreciate what I'm saying, which I think you should, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50. If you want to see if the person you're with is someone you want to raise kids with, you need to listen to this program with them. You need to sit them down and listen to them with me. And if your person you're with is probably a woman, they're going to have all sorts of ideas about how they're wrong. You are not going to want to deal with that person. Break up with them. You do not want to raise children with someone who thinks I am automatically wrong no matter what. I will tell you that right now. It's going to end up with you letting them screw up your children because you're going to be too scared and they're going to be too presumptuous to take advice, and they're going to screw up your children. You're going to have to watch them screw up your children. So my gift to you is the quality of premarital counseling, which is making them sit down and watch this. And if they can have a healthy discussion about how I'm right and I'm wrong, that's one thing. If they say that, they can't listen to me because I'm a sexist and a misogynist and I'm obviously wrong about everything, then they're going to use all those same words on you when they try to put your son in a dress or something like that. and then you're gonna say like, I don't think that's a good idea. And they're gonna be like, well, yeah, you're just anti-trans. So like you need to watch this with them and gauge how they take this. If they storm out of the room, they are not going to be a good partner with raising kids with you. And you're going to let them screw up your kids. Or if they could see, well, he's kind of right about this, but kind of wrong about this. And if they can have a measured discussion about me talking at them, then it's the kind of person you're going to want to like raise the kids with, because they'll be able to like work with you when they're wrong and you happen to be right. And they'll actually be able to hear you say it. So you're welcome. I am the litmus test. I am the litmus test for your significant others. I'm gonna clip the parts where you're talking about women so they don't ad hominem. Yeah, if you have to do that, then you've already lost. If they can't take their medicine, like you've already lost. If you have to clip me because they can't take me straight, no chaser, 200 proof, triple distilled. If they can't take this moonshine, then you're already lost, because you'll be censoring yourself when it comes to actually the rubber meets the roads, and you're gonna have to raise kids against all of like the nonsense they have in their head about how to raise kids. I will say, and I said this on Twitter, it's been my experience, and I might be wrong about this, my son is at a disadvantage, not because it's a man's world, but because nobody's trying to teach him how to be a woman. Now, my daughters, on the other hand, and it took me a while to figure this out, probably a year or two too long, the worst influence on my daughters were other women teaching them how to be girls and women. Right? By far the worst influence on my daughters. So I cut a lot of those women out of my daughter's life, and then things got better. But like, women are bad at raising women. Women are bad at raising girls. American women. Other, like, outside it's different, but American women are bad at raising girls. American women are bad at raising girls. And so you just got to be very careful about like what kind of American women you put your kids around. Guys are actually fine. They get it. But American women are bad. Like, they give bad advice to girls about how to be women. And they give bad advice to girls about how to be girls. So be very suspicious of the girls around your girls. Because in teaching them how to be women, they'll smuggle in a lot of BS. They gotta like you first. No, they shouldn't have to. Right? So Jaboctimus Prime says, nah, I think once they can agree with some of your ideas, then I can unleash the single moms are bad parents. Well, yeah, it's not necessarily. You can be a single mom for a lot of different reasons. Some of those good reasons are good and bad. Single moms who filed for a no-fault divorce, those are bad parents. Single moms who filed for a no-fault divorce because they are domestically incompatible with the child's father, those are bad parents. Because now you got a kid who has a legitimate other parent and has to reconcile and has to make compatible something that you've determined was already not compatible. You put the cross on the child. And that's a great way to make a little nihilist. That's like being an Orthodox Jew 3 days a week, and then being an Orthodox Catholic another 3 days a week. Actually, maybe those orthodoxies will mix. I don't know. But it's like you gotta, and then expecting the kid to figure it out. Because both the parents are happy. The Orthodox Jew parents happy, and the Orthodox Catholic's parents happy. It's the kid who's now going to have an existential crisis. End up blowing up a school. All right. Or just become a mercenary. I think single moms raise a lot of mercenary daughters and feckless sons. I might be able to give you a longer argument about why that's the case, but look around in your life and think about how many single moms raise daughters who themselves are like little mercenaries, little money-hungry whatevers. And then how many of those single moms also raise sons who are a little bit feckless, have a hard time pulling the trigger, committing, and like have a hard time kind of finding their way in this world. Yeah, the divorced ones. All right, so I'm just saying I don't think that's a problem. I think divorced single moms raise gold digger daughters and then are surprised when that happens, and then their sons end up a little bit like gun shy because they don't want to deal with the contingency that was their parents' marriage. All right, thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm saying, which I think you should, go to www.funkyacademics.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, and I will talk to you when I talk to you about something completely different. Peace.